Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Government has spent more than a decade building digital service teams, but a new retrospective argues that many successes depended on workarounds rather than lasting institutional change. The authors say the next challenge is creating durable systems that can consistently deliver results and help agencies make better decisions. Here to walk us through their recommendations are Laura Sigelmann and Merici Vinton of the Federation of American Scientists. Merici and Laura, it's so delightful to have you on the show. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us, longtime listener. It's great to be here.
Oh, great. I love to have longtime listeners on this show. Merici, let's start with you because this new report on digital services is really fascinating. You talk to people kind of across the spectrum, U.S. Digital Services, 18F, state and local digital services organizations. When you listened through all of those conversations, what was the biggest conclusion that surprised you at this point?
What was so fascinating is across over 100 people we talked to was the wide variety and huge array of experiences that everyone had. There were very few individuals who showed up to work and kind of had the same impact, the same set of objectives or goals. And essentially what it showed us is that in the digital government field, this is a new field, and there's no shared mental model for what this work looks like. Effectively, there were no patterns. There were no through lines in the work. And that's actually an opportunity for us to really define, to look to the past to see what worked well, but also to define where we want to go in the future. And that's what we did with this entire report and project.
Laura, I want to come to you next. Merici's just said there are no mental models. There's no pattern. I know we've been talking about digital government services for over a decade, and yet the report says that the government lacks not only those models, but a common theory of change for digital services. What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, absolutely. We found across all of the different retros that there wasn't a coherent strategy, there wasn't a theory of change time to outcomes, that these different teams and initiatives were operating within their own spaces, their own silos, competing for resources, focusing on their own individual goals rather than sort of this shared agency or government-wide outcomes. And that's really what we mean by theory of change, is understanding what those societal level outcomes we are trying to achieve. Is that improved health services, better access to healthcare, and then how the government as a whole uses digital services to achieve those outcomes, how these different agencies and initiatives engage with that. And so it's essentially a strategy for how we go from this highest level of societal change all the way down to how are individual teams engaging with that strategy and how are the outcomes that they are trying to achieve contributing to those broader society and government-wide efforts.
And so without a theory of change, I mean, this may seem like an obvious question. How do you get results? How do you know what direction to go in?
It really took a lot of individual empowerment, individual entrepreneurialism, in some cases political leadership was a helpful partner, but really it took the heroic efforts of individuals to get a lot of this work over the line. A more mature government would say, okay, we expect this, our citizens expect this type of interaction with their government, and this is what we're going to do, and just set it out, versus kind of coming in from behind to try to get something over the line.
Merici, let's follow up on that because heroic efforts is usually not a sustainable pattern of behavior. Your report says the field has struggled to scale and relied on workarounds for years. In fact, it says explicitly that the ways the government does work through hiring processes, standards, and common resources are incompatible with modern service delivery and impossible to scale. That's a pretty strong statement. What did you find there that was broken and what should be fixed?
There was so much collective energy and effort spent on bringing technologists into government that almost became the outcome itself. when I came back into government, I realized that the way to hire people like me who are technologists, it is that there's no career path. We are in government for a term appointment in most agencies, especially at the U.S. Digital Service, but most agencies it's similar. It is a series of workarounds. It is not, let's say, a lawyer career path or an accountant at the IRS. Those are patterns that have been repeated for decades. And so these workarounds take a lot of convincing. They take a lot of political capital from your chief human capital officer who may not even think that it's, a legitimate workaround. So that the effort that is expended to do this is just means it can't scale. And we saw that in all of my time in government. So what we're recommending is defined pathways, career pathways for this field. If you want the government to be more digital, to make it easier for people across the country to do what they need, then you should make it easier to hire the talent needed to make that happen. And also really to set, incredibly high standards for what these services should look like. I worked on the free tax filing project, Direct File, and we had really high standards that we set for ourselves across accessibility, across interaction. Our work increased trust in the IRS by 86% and had net promoter scores that were incredibly high. Those standards should be the baseline for all standards that government has for interactions. And so you need to bring in the talent to make that work scale and to set those higher standards for users.
Merici Vinton is a senior fellow, and Laura Sigelmann is a senior manager for government capacity at the Federation of American Scientists. Merici, let's follow that thread then, because if we have a hard time hiring technologists, how is it that the report says we build digital teams but not digital services? What does a service-centered model look like? And how is it different from the way most agencies operate today?
It's a really great question. So we really took a lot of inspiration on the service model by looking actually at our international governments that are they're more mature in their digital government. And one of them is the United Kingdom. And the way that they take their approach to digital services is around a service. So service is something that you need to accomplish. So for example, file my taxes or, get my student loan money, like my FAFSA. So things, renew my passport. So these are services, and a more mature model builds a service team that cuts across silos. And so effectively you have in one team, the technology team, the designers, the user researchers, people that are talking to your users, next to the policy and the program experts, next to the lawyers, next to your customer support team. And so you're creating this really great feedback loop that is coherent, that really means the users get their outcome accomplished in one task. Also, if there's appeals or adjudication, it is all part of that same team. That's what we consider a service team. So it's not a team of technologists. It is a cross-functional team of people delivering for people. That's a very mature model, but we believe that's actually going to lead to the best outcome for both users and for government functionally, because you're bringing more modern approaches to delivery into some of the more traditional areas of government, some of the more paper-based areas of government. And there's an opportunity to make the experience better for both the users and the practitioners that I think is really exciting. And the approach that we've taken to date in the federal government in the United States typically has been a centralized digital team that reports into an agency lead or a CIO. And that it's kind of its own silo. And it's a good model, but it's been really the only model we've had. And what our report is outlining is you can have different models based on the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you're implementing a legislation, there could be an implementation team. If you're trying to bring legacy COBOL into a modern, cloud-based platform, that's a different type of skill set that could require a different team. So really what we're advocating and what we're asking leaders to do is to build the right team for the right problem.
Laura, let me ask you to chime in here. You did a little bit of work on those international models. Tell us which one. Merici walked through the UK model, but is there another one that really strikes you as being a great example?
Yeah. When I was at USAID, I worked a lot with the government of Ukraine, and they had a centralized Ministry of Digital Transformation that was responsible for a number of things, delivering on government-wide priorities, setting standards, building and managing shared platforms. And by having this central capacity, they were able to develop services across the government. They had these teams that were building different products and services end to end. And that's one of the examples that we've looked for. And it also ties into one of our recommendations about building this type of centralized digital capacity in the US. And, to make sure that we're able to really hold different agencies accountable, drive momentum for these end-to-end services, like Merici mentioned, we need to actually have that capacity within our federal government.
Merici, the report says this is the time for radical experimentation, delivery, and exploration. Radical sometimes sets some people's teeth on edge, but if you were going down that path, what do agency leaders and the center of government, OMB and GSA, need to do differently right now to create the different future that you all envision?
It is an opportunity to be ambitious. I think right now what we're seeing, people are losing faith in their institutions, and this has been a decline over decades, and that decline is only increasing. And so this is an opportunity to show that government can deliver, because at this point, deliver in new ways, because at this point we've got nothing left to lose. What we think is really interesting as a new, more ambitious future is to look at a central government department that has the authority, that has the confidence, the muscular authorities to really drive a modernization agenda, to really ensure that the work that digital teams are doing in government is open sourced and available and repeatable and usable across the government, saving cities, because this project also, remember, included cities and states, saving them money because they can reuse a lot of the shared platforms that are built once. To really think about, again, we've talked about hiring, how the hiring patterns should be implementable at every agency. This is an opportunity to really rethink how we do this, how we have a shared platform like login.gov, and to deliver not just the shared services, but also to take this approach to different agencies, into different cities and counties and states across the country. But what we've lacked to date is the authority to do this work, the accountability to do this work. It has all kind of been based on moment in time political leadership, moment in time entrepreneurial leaders inside of agencies or from a digital service team. And that's been great to date, but a more visionary approach could really set out a long-term plan for what digital and government looks and feels like, and then to start executing on it immediately.
Merici Vinton is a senior fellow, and Laura Sigelmann is a senior manager for government capacity at the Federation of American Scientists. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Terry. Great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
We'll post this interview and a link to their report at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.